Welcome to the December webinar with Troy Love. We're so glad you're here. And there's a question just like that. So grateful for this. Oh,
Well,
uh, you're
they
typing.
asked what kind of topics, and I said you could ask whatever you want, just not math questions, because I don't do.
Oh, I love math. I have
Well,
a,
good. Well, then,
yeah, my degree is in math and
you
my
can do the math.
minor was in statistics. So there you go.
I didn't mind
Yeah,
statistics.
Troy will cover the rest.
Yeah, I didn't mind statistics. I don't know why I could wrap my head around that, but the rest of math, that's why I became a social worker, I guess.
That was my major. That tells you something about me right off the bat, doesn't it? So, oh well. So questions, or well, let's talk about how the voices of shame can show up at the holidays. Let's talk
Wow.
about that. That's a good topic.
Yeah. So when you are around family, there is a lot of opportunities for your attachment wounds to be hit. So you might experience some loss or some neglect or some rejection. Maybe your parent or family member is going to say something mean or whatever. So there's a lot of opportunities for wounds to be hit, which can be debilitating for a lot of people. So number one, just recognizing that it's probably going to happen when you have a bunch of people who have attachment wounds that haven't really been dealt with or healed, and you put them all together. We're going to bump up against each other's wounds. Most of the time, we don't do it on purpose. So recognizing that, trying to have some compassion for ourselves and others for that. And then also being able to understand that that's not really a reflection on you. What tends to happen when our rejection wound or our wounds get hit is we have an internal dialogue around that. Yesterday, 2 days ago, my rejection wound was hit pretty hard. I had applied for something I was wanting to be a part of, and I didn't make the cut, and so that really hit my rejection wound a lot, and my shadows came out big time. And I processed it. I reached out to friends. I talked to people and understood, like, okay, this is a thing. I totally know what it is. I'm gonna whine and complain for a minute. Give me a second to whine and complain, and then I'm gonna breathe and I'm gonna come back up to that place of groundedness. And so that may happen. You might need to go outside and go for a walk or find a way to get grounded again and remind yourself what is the purpose of being together with family is, to enjoy each other. So there's I'll put a link to an article that I wrote about how to survive the holidays that maybe Tommy can put there too. So
I would be happy to. Yeah, and it is challenging, and and I hear you, and I get the rejection when I think a lot of it is owning it. And for me personally, that's my least favorite. I don't even want to have a rejection wound. I would rather not care. And like abandonment, that's different. But I hear you doing self-care, but also you already owned it. You reached out. I've done the same thing where I have like a time limit. I can feel sorry for myself, but it's like I have a very specific time frame. Like you can whine for this long and it's
yeah,
short. And
yeah,
then you have to do something different. So you own it, process it, and move forward. But I think it's really important too, like there's always a cutoff. Somebody always doesn't make the cut, and it's not a personal thing. And making sure that we are not like that. That does not define who you are, Troy. Like it's like I'm sorry you didn't get that. And maybe it opens the door for something else. Like, who knows? So, like, there's all of those things. But yes, in the moment, the rejection wound, you know, but it would not, like, I don't care if 100 people say, oh, Troy, you're the greatest in those moments. Like, that external validation doesn't cut it. It's like we've got to come to that place for ourselves.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the Q&A, we've got some. Wondering what your thoughts are on hypnosis therapy for sex addiction, not with a CSAT.
Um, that's a broad question. I am trained in hypnosis, so I'm not against it. I think that it has its place. I know that when I first learned about it, I was looking for like the magic bullet that would just like take away the need for that. And I've learned over the last 30 years of my life, there isn't a magic pill or a magic wand or a magic whatever that makes it go away. So I will say that if that's what you're looking for, no. But hypnosis does have its place. It can help work through some trauma. It can help rewire some of those negative core beliefs and have you reframe them in a different way. So I'm not opposed to it. I would just make a suggestion that you find somebody who has been trained and has some certification around their hypnosis tools that they use, and not just somebody who says that they do that. It's so just do your research on the person and say that. But I'm not opposed if if it helps you, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too.
Well, and I think that that's really key. And like, what is your goal with hypnosis? I think with every, any therapist you're seeing, there should be there should be a goal of therapy. There should be a goal for treatment. There's a treatment plan. Like there should be very specific. So, I have a wonderful therapist and she will do EMDR with me or like, yeah, like the last time I was there, I have like, homework, all good. I'm happy to do it. I want progress. But this is a matter and or an issue, and this is what we're going to do. So just doing stuff randomly, I would be suspect. And it would also be, if you're here and I'm assuming you're the person that identifies as having, sex addiction or compulsive behaviors. What else are you doing? I don't care if you're seeing Troy Love every week. That won't be enough. It's, are you doing 12 step? Are you doing our drop-in groups? Are you doing our online work groups? So like, what else are you doing? Because there's no magic, fix for any of this stuff. These are maladaptive coping mechanisms. We have to learn how to address life, and without, turning to our compulsive behaviors. And the more like, and I'm going to give gratitude to Troy with this too. It's like the more we understand, what our wounds are that are getting poked, we can go, okay, there's my rejection wound or there's my abandonment wound. And what do I need to do to fix that, without turning to external things that will never fill the hole in the soul. We'll always be vulnerable to someone else. That does not mean we do this on our own, but we have to be really clear on what we're seeking, when we're looking for those things. But there's lots of modalities, and like lots, and I just talked to somebody the other day and they were like, oh, EMDR didn't really work for me. I said, try somatic experience. So try, try,
Something else.
yeah, see what works. Okay, can you please do a quick explanation of exactly, I think attachment wounds refer to and the conditions that cause these attachment wounds?
Yeah. So as humans, we're wired for connection. And as we grow up and as we go through our life, there are things that happen that will break or damage or even separate those connections completely. And depending on how often it happened or how traumatic it was, it can create what I call attachment wounds, which we don't see, but they exist. And they're similar to a sunburn. And if anybody bumped up against you when you have a sunburn, your body reacts. You pull away or you try to push people away because you're trying to protect yourself from that pain being hit again. And that's what these attachment wounds are like. And so these are the six. They're most of them are self-explanatory. So if you take a look at that, and we can put a link for you can learn more about those as well. I'll put that up there for you too. But these are the wounds. And so then how that affects each other is when now I have my two biggest wounds are abandonment and rejection. And so when I'm feeling like people are not showing up for me, especially when I'm actually reaching out, and I'm in a place where I'm in a lot of pain, and I finally convince myself it's okay to reach out, and then they don't respond, that really activates that abandonment wound a lot. And that makes me want to pull away and isolate some more. So I've recognized that that's a pattern for me. So part of this is recognizing these are wounds, and there's patterns of what I normally do when they get hit. And then as we go through the healing process, it's like, so how can I start to do some wound care for these wounds so they don't hurt so bad? How can I reframe what I've come to believe about myself uh, because of these wounds so that those are more adaptive belief systems and those kind of things. So that that's the summary of it, but that is hopefully helpful.
Well, let's talk because they asked too what causes these things. I mean, like it's a myriad of things, and this and it isn't like, well, this causes rejection, this causes abandonment. I pulled out my stuff, from Troy and went, oh, like I have lots of things in my rejection, category. It wasn't like one thing and the things that he's, that may be on his list of these were part of my wounding could be completely different for me and again from someone else. So there could be patterns of things, but it isn't like this causes that. It's how we end up feeling, that that ultimately puts it in a category is what I'm trying to think of. Is that
Right, yeah. So it can come from different sources. So rejection for me came a lot when I was in, especially in middle school and early high school, where I was bullied a lot. Um, I was bullied a severe amount and didn't feel like I belonged. And that was then the story that I began to believe about myself as I don't matter and I don't belong. So it can come from a variety of different places. It can come from your parents, it can come from peers, it can come from just life itself. So one of the things that I like about using this model is it's not about blaming. So my abandonment wound comes from being adopted. I was adopted at birth. My birth mother made the decision to give me to another family. And so there's an abandonment wound there. It's pretty big, even though a lot of healing has happened with that. And I've met my birth mother and we have a really great relationship and all that stuff. But it was like if I got focused on the blame, then I'm missing the what actually is needed is the wound care. So that's one of the things to notice is it's not about who did it, it's what am I going to do with the wound that I have and how can I work on that so I can be the best human I want to be on this planet.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like Dr. Eddie Caparucci, and I've shared this before too, quoted Dr. Gabor Mate. We can't make it unhappen. You can't be, unadopted, like you can't, like none of that you can undo. So here's where you are now, and how do you move forward, so that we can be the best human beings that we possibly can be, continuing to learn and grow along the way, I hope, I don't want to get stuck. So, but I think a lot of it in your work, Troy, is like we identify the wounds. Like you got, you have these wounds, and what do we need to do for wound care?
Mhm.
Okay. I'd like to know how attachment disorders play into recovery for the addict and recovery for the betrayed spouse. Great question.
Right. So the attachment wounds were part of what leads people to want to go numb in a variety of different ways. So when I'm working with individuals who are struggling with addiction, the first thing that I'm starting to look at is, okay, tell me about your attachment wounds and how have you been trying to mitigate those attachment wounds through your drug of choice or your acting out of choice. And it's the same with the partner. Oftentimes when this whole thing falls apart, they end up having a massive betrayal wound that they didn't have before. And so now it's caused them to question reality. It's caused them to question who they can trust. It causes them to question themselves. And so there's a lot of fear around that. And so when we start to move into recovery, one of the beautiful things about the attachment wounds is if you look at the opposite of them, it gives you a sense of what I might need. So with betrayal, the opposite of betrayal is trust. And so what I need is to have some people in my life that I can trust. Now that name may not be my partner at the moment because they're working on that, but there are other people that I can lean on and trust. And so I might find that in a support group or a drop-in group. I might find that from a friend at church. I might find that with a neighbor that I've been able to confide in and have them share their love and compassion with me. So that's part of it, is learning, well, when my wound is being hit, what do I need and what's a healthier way of getting that? And then when we're dealing with a partner and the partner and they both have their needs, is how do we communicate that in a way that maybe we never did before? Maybe I wasn't aware of my needs, and so I would go find maladaptive ways of trying to take care of them because I didn't believe that they were going to actually be met in the first place. And now I've learned that I can, and so I'm communicating and I'm sharing with my partner, and my partner sharing with me. And so we were able to build a new dynamic of healing around these wounds rather than continuing the patterns that we got caught up in the past.
Yeah, and this is not like you're in recovery for 5 minutes and you're going to be able to do these tools. These are tools to use along the journey. Just knowing that there are tools there, if with an addict, it's like stop the problematic behavior, and have the support to stay stopped, not just keep going back every time, oh, my rejection wound got poked. We use everything for a reason, excuse. So we have got to learn the tools that no matter what's happening, we can choose differently.
Mhm.
Okay. So the next question, we are 4.5 years into this. I'm the betrayer. I'm trying to start setting some limits. She gets angry and criticizes and dumps on me. And yesterday threw a headlight at me. Geez, while we were walking in a nature preserve at 6 a.m. I addressed my portion of the event by apologizing for getting activated, raising my voice, and being defensive. She swept her behavior under the rug. She asked this morning if I wanted to walk. I said I was going to take a break from that for a week. I said that her behavior yesterday hurt a lot and she didn't clean up her mess. She immediately got angry and told me that I didn't either. I didn't take the bait and just let her know that I wasn't available and that I would reconsider if she wanted to address her behavior, as I didn't feel safe walking with her again. Setting the boundary was difficult and messy, but I'm trying to protect myself some from the inappropriate expressions of rage. I know she is hurt, but I just can't keep exposing myself this. I tried to be specific. I don't see the question. Oh, she called me. Oh, goodness. She called me 2 hours later crying at work as her number two at work attacked her verbally and made lots of criticisms and judgments and gave her lots of unsolicited advice. I took the call and talked for 30 minutes and another 30 minutes in the evening to offer support around that. So I am still loving her unconditionally, but not being passive aggressive or shutting her out. I was still available in other ways throughout the day, making coffee, breakfast, etc. Okay, this is really long. We're going to keep going, but like next time, just a sentence or two. My wife of 25 years, Troy knows all this. Okay, so I have to circle back. So looking for guidance, I eventually took a time out as she continued to criticize me, my approach, my words, and explaining my boundary and my efforts to make amends, just looking for any input. I set her off yesterday morning with a statement. It has been a month since we were walking in the arroyo. That was it. And she went into a rage.
So thank you, first of all, for sharing that with us. There is a lot of anger, obviously, that the partner has when their betrayal wound has been hit. They didn't see it coming, and then they react the ways that they do. And that is a challenging pattern that happens even when there's not addiction happening. So first I want to have empathy for how difficult that is for both of you. And you're you're wanting to set boundaries, and great for you with that. So the challenge that I have is that I hear blaming in there a little bit. And I don't know how you not tell the story without a little bit of blame. Uh, and this is the thing that I notice with partners a lot, is that they want to blame rather than saying what's coming up for them, or any of us, not just partners. I want to point out that you didn't do something that I thought you should do, or you didn't do something that I needed you to do. And I want to focus on what you did or did not do, instead of taking a look at, well, what's coming up for me? And that takes some practice and vulnerability. So if I have a betrayal wound, I'm probably not going to feel very comfortable being that vulnerable with you. I'd rather just throw a headlight at you, as a way of trying to explain to you that I'm hurting, and that obviously doesn't communicate very clearly what I need. So to give you an example of what that looks like, it's like when this happened, this wound got hit for me. My betrayal wound got hit, and I'm really struggling to know where we're at. I feel really slippery right now. We're walking right into the holidays where things are going to get complicated, and I'm feeling like the earth is being pulled out from under me, and it makes me so angry. I'm so angry. What I feel is being taken from me is as my choice and my ability to feel safe and all that. And so if you're noticing it, if I'm doing that, I'm trying to own all of that, which then as you as the partner, when you hear that, you're probably going to be able to show up a little bit more empathically and say, oh my gosh, that sounds really challenging, even though I know that I was part of the reason why this is being triggered in the first place. That takes a lot of practice. And that's not how most people do that. So they start to blame. And then we go into the burpees, which you've all heard about them before: blame, rescue, protest, or escape. So the moment that one of us does a burpee, the other of us is going to do a burpee right back. So the moment that your partner blames, you're probably going to go right into protest, and it happens automatically. And when we do that, we've already started the death spiral of disconnection, and we're not going to attend to the wounds. So I hear that she's angry, and she's feeling frustrated. And so when she starts to blame, you can catch that, and what you don't do is point out what she's doing wrong, because now you've just started blaming, right? So another way of doing that is saying, okay, I'm seeing your anger. I see you're really angry right now. I'm here with you. It sounds like you're needing something, and I'm not quite hearing what it is that you're needing, because there's it's kind of messed up. But we can take a break, and can you share with me what it is that you need, or that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of validation, honoring that there's pain. Doesn't excuse behavior, but it's like I get that, like, there's a lot going on here. So can we just breathe for a second? How can I show up for you right now? I'm hearing that you're really upset. I'm hearing that you're really upset with me. What would be best for us to be able to show up for each other right now? Does that help? I feel like I said a lot without saying.
No, that no, but you're looking to, because nothing changes if nothing changes, and yeah, and even though, well, you didn't clean up your side of that, well, you didn't clean, like, like that's but I often share, and it's usually with betrayed partners, that the system will always fight a change. So if you are trying to instate boundaries and the relationship has been boundaryless, if you were acting out, and now, I mean, there will be a pushback, and so having the emotional fortitude to be able to hold the space. I love Erin Snow has shared, like holding it out in front of you. Others have as well too, but it's like you're not a sponge. You don't take that on. You're holding the space. So what Troy was talking about is like I can see that you're angry. Can you like you're holding the space for it, but you're not going, oh, like you're attacking me, and now I've been victimized, like it shifts things. And you've been on before. You've probably heard me, share the podcast that Dr. Rob did with Dr. Stan Tatkin in January of 2019 of what a healthy relationship is and isn't. I would invite you both to listen to that and see if that's what you want. Separately, I wrote a blog, and I'll pull the information, but we had, should I stay or should I go? And it isn't even like, oh, we're going to divorce or not. No, it's like there's 10 questions to ask. And I bet if you each ask those and compared notes, it's like, do I like this person? Like, oh, yeah, I really do like this person. We've got a long history together. You might find some common ground. So rather than my suggestion, rather than focusing on, these areas of pain points, where's the common ground? How can we turn and work towards each other if you want to? I mean, everybody makes their choices, for their relationship, but the, getting into recovery, great. And, being in healthy relationships, was so worth it. And Dr. Stan, talks about in a healthy relationship, we are healthier, we are happy. All of these good things happen to us individually if we're in a healthy relationship. The converse is true. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, it's toxic for both of you. So I always hope people want, if you're in a relationship, be in a healthy one. Okay, my real question is, forget the other one. What happens if I am so numb? I call it having a heart of stone where I just can't get there. Over the last 20 years, I dove deep into inner child workshops, 2 years with the same group. Whenever I tell someone my story of abuse in areas of my childhood and early teens, it's like I'm only the narrator telling someone else's story. I can't connect with any emotions to the event. I know this is where my brain thinks it is helping me block it out, but in fact, causing more damage. How can I break through to feelings? And if I cannot, do I really need to? Great question.
Mm, yeah, thank you. So one of the side effects, the unfortunate side effects of addiction, regardless of your drug of choice, is that we are numbing. We are spending a ton of time numbing the pain. And we do it in hopes that we'll feel joy, we'll feel love, we'll feel warm fuzzies, whatever we're doing it for. And the challenge is that you can't selectively numb emotion. So when you numb one emotion, you numb all the emotions. So when I'm numbing the anger and I'm numbing the sadness and I'm numbing the pain, I'm also numbing the joy and I'm numbing the happiness and I'm numbing the love. And so as you're sharing with me and you you have this heart of stone, what I'm hearing is that you've just wrapped that heart around with a lot of walls to try and protect you from feeling pain and feeling hurt. And now you've been doing some work, you've been working on this for a long time, you've tapping into some inner child work and going to some other groups. And so what you're basically doing is you're getting the chisel out and you are chiseling away at that stone wall that you put around yourself trying to protect you. So part of what I would be curious about is, so if you were sad about the abuse that you went through, what would you be sad about? Sadness comes from a sense of losing things. So what did you lose because of the abuse? And just sitting with that and maybe making a list of all the things that you've lost because of the abuse that you went through. Anger comes from a sense that things were taken from you without your permission. So what was taken from you? Especially if you were a little boy, I'm assuming you're a boy, when you were a little boy and you were abused, what was taken from you? What parts of your life were taken without your consent? You didn't say that it was okay for that to be taken from you. Fear comes from a sense that something really bad is going to happen. And so what were you really afraid was going to happen when you were a little kid? And what are you still afraid of? And so starting to map some of those out and just staying with those three primary core emotions, those were the wrong one, three core emotions of anger, fear, and sadness. Just let's just start with those first. We can explore the bigger and more complex emotions as we go, but let's start with sadness first. Let's start with the anger first and see if you can really tune into what was lost. And then if you're working with your therapist, or it sounds like you have some groups, as you start to do that, you see if you can get a spark of that sadness. And where would you feel that in your body? Even if it's tiny, where do you feel it? Can you give yourself permission to feel it? Can you give yourself permission to breathe into that, um, and lean in? Because none of us like to feel the pain and the emotion. We want to keep the walls up. So those are some of the thoughts that I have as I'm reading that.
I have two ideas, and I have no idea if there's any merit in them. But like when you're talking about chiseling away the wall, I don't know, I was like, I don't think you have a heart of stone. I think you have a very fragile heart that's been very, very wounded, and it's way safer to, to have that massive, wall up. So your heart's in there, but it's got, lots of stuff. So I had an idea. I wonder if you had a picture of you from a young age and you looked at that little picture and what did that little boy, feel like? What was his hopes and dreams? Like if you could look at the picture of you and think about it more from that standpoint rather than the adult narrative. I would also wonder if you had somebody like interrupt you, like you could tell a sentence or two and then somebody interrupts you and says, "And what were you feeling in that moment? How old were you?" Like start to investigate the story more. And Troy said writing down, I love journaling. Actually, I personally hate journaling, but I find it super helpful. But like I hate having to do that, but it's super helpful. There's all kinds of research about it. And I wonder if you journaled about some of those things, as you're, like instead of just, the news version of the story, it's like if you're journaling, like just write a sentence and then this happened and I was only 7 years old and this and da 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 whatever, and I would like get more specific about the environment, all of those things, because I bet there's some cracks in the massive stone wall. Make sure you have support along the way because this could be hurtful, as you're dealing with, and it's scary, not hurtful. It could hurt. And it's scary to approach those things. It feels safer to hold up the things, but like Troy said, you miss out on all the good, like you can't just pack away the bad emotions, you pack away all of the emotions, including joy and connection and all the good things in life, when you do that. So um, I feel like I lost my childhood. Couldn't be happy and just a little boy. But yeah, go get that picture out. Go look at yourself and tell how you feel about that little kid.
And if it sounds like you've done some work around that, but if you, I know Dr. Caparucci has his class coming up,
Yes, in
um,
January. Yeah.
the inner child, healing the inner child. If you haven't taken a look at that, that might be a tool that you want to use to connect with that little guy and give him space to cry. You said he couldn't be happy. He couldn't feel anything. So what would happen if we gave him a little bit of space to feel that?
Yeah. And and being okay with, feeling like a 7-year-old and crying, again, I have an amazing therapist and like mine is 8 and learning to adult my inner child was massively helpful for you. And Troy pointed out Dr. Eddie's group, but what I often encourage people to pair Dr. Eddie's and Troy's work groups because the attachment wounds and inner child, and both of them talk about the other's work. They're so complementary. They're different enough, and they approach things. And I think the two of them together, at different times. Dr. Eddie only offers his twice a year, but and including January as a start. But that work is helpful on this journey.
Mm.
Okay, so Dean here, addict substitution. 30 years ago, I quit drugs and alcohol. I substituted with coffee, sex, and cigarettes. I quit coffee and cigarettes, but kept sex. 2.5 years ago, I entered sex addiction recovery and substituted with stress eating and phone scrolling video games. In March, I started working Overeaters Anonymous, and now I'm looking at addressing my screen use. It's a final addiction I'm aware of. I feel uneasy approaching this next addiction. Thank you for sharing this. The holistic, like, yeah, anything we're hanging on to, like, we're just using something else. We call it the whack-a-mole. You're just moving. So thank you. Like, and that's layers, so I'm grateful for you being willing to really look at that. But guess what? As you start letting go of all those or those maladaptive coping mechanisms, you're going to be bumping up against attachment wounds.
Mm. So if you were in the room with me, I'd be asking, okay, what are you uneasy about? You are giving something up, right? Something that has been helping you numb pain, has helped you preoccupy yourself with other things so you don't have to deal with other things. So What is the part of deciding to deal with your amount of screen use causing you the most anxiety about? And what is it that you feel that you're going to lose by giving that up? And then thinking about all the stuff, all the other stuff you gave up, the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the cigarettes. What were you afraid back then that you were going to miss out on if you didn't give that up? And now that you're reflecting back, what did you actually lose that? Was it good that you lost that? Was it actually better that you lost that? And then using that to motivate you as you're looking at, okay, this is the next part of me taking this next step. Part of, I'm going to use that the wall analogy a little bit more. I think that we are beings of light. We're beings of glory. We're beings of amazing value and worth, and then we get covered up. And so there's this story that I love to tell. In a long time ago, in like, well, I'll back it up. In the 1960s in Thailand, they were going to make some major reconstruction of the country, and they wanted to revamp some of the temples that had gone obsolete or hadn't been taken care of. And there was this massive Buddhist statue made out of clay. It was made out of stucco and clay, and it had been sitting underneath it been sitting under a temple that literally had fallen apart. So there was nothing protecting it from the elements and all that stuff, but they needed to move it because they were going to build a highway that was going to go through where that was, and they wanted to move it and put it somewhere that it could be seen and recognized and valued by them. And so they got the cranes to come, and as they were trying to pick up the statue, the crane broke because the statue was so heavy. And they didn't understand what was going on. Well, as they were looking at it, some of the mud chipped off of it. And what they discovered is that underneath it was solid gold.
Oh,
It
wow.
was a solid gold Buddhist statue that centuries before, when invaders were coming into the country, the monks covered it up to protect it from being stolen by the invaders. And so it had sat there for hundreds of years in the dirt, in the mud. And so they took it off, and it's this beautiful golden statue. And to me, that is the analogy of what is happening to us. We've been covered with dirt and pain and stucco and all kinds of stuff. And then as we begin recovery, whatever recovery it is that we're working on, we're starting to chip away these parts that have been covering us up. And as we do that, our light shines. And there's a part of me that maybe is afraid of letting my light shine. And so I'm like, no, keep that back on there. Cut that back on there. So you're like, I'm getting ready to face this next one. What are you afraid is going to be seen? What your light is about to shine even more magnificently than it was before. So what can you do to remind yourself that that's worth it? Because there are moments when I want to put the mud back on and I want to go back to my maladaptive behaviors because it was easier. And so I honor it, and I can't wait to see the light that shines as you continue to work on that. So congratulations, Dean.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, like we live such compartmentalized lives and we always have a facade that we're showing the outside world. So, you're inviting people to shed the facade, be your true self. We can't really know true love and connection if we're always just showing a little sliver of ourselves to people. They don't get to know the real us. And it's really scary to go, well, if they really know who I am, they won't want to be around me. But I want to be around people who want to be with me, and I want to be with them in this really messy thing we call life, not just a fraction of me, showing up.
Hmm.
But the next person says, I love what Troy says about the wall needing to be chiseled and get past the wounds. It's so helpful. And I was like it almost feels like it's not just a one wall on the outside. It's like it's in a box of like really thick stuff. So it's like you got to chisel from all different, sides too. So, oh, it's from Joseph Campbell who told that in the movie Finding Joe. That was helpful to remind me of that. I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that story before. I love it. So, and Joseph Campbell has such amazing things. So,
Oh yeah, it talks about, the archetypes and the different characters, the hero with 1,000 faces. So beautiful.
other questions for Troy? Anybody have anxiety about family get-togethers next week and the following week?
I get to go to Tennessee to
Oh,
visit.
fun.
So
Where in Tennessee?
well, it's actually Kentucky. It's right on the border of Tennessee,
Okay.
Kentucky at Fort Campbell.
Oh, yeah.
So I will be an hour away from Nashville, which I've never been to. So
I love Nashville. Enjoy. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I really do. Like that would be an area that I could potentially live. So
Mm.
I'm so picky, like it would be hard to pry me out of Arizona, but
I did post. I put it in Lonnie's answer, but there's a quote from C.S. Lewis that I really love. And he says, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in a casket or coffin of your selfishness.
mm,
But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. And that's really what we're talking about. It's like we do our best to not be hurt. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to have neglect. I don't want to experience betrayal. So I'm going to find a way to lock that up and prevent it from happening again. But the challenge in doing so is that we end up being numb. We end up not being able to connect. We end up being very alone. So there's risk with vulnerability, but the outcome can be beautifully, profoundly healing if we're willing to not lock ourselves up in the caskets of pain.
that's a very apt analogy because that's what it feels like. You end up in a casket alone, if you choose to be that safe. And you're safe, but you are alone. Um, does ASD affect attachment?
Do you know, is that autism? It must be
I
autism
think autism spectrum disorder.
disorder. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what that means.
Yes.
So yeah, it does. People who are on the spectrum experience life a little differently than others, and so their ability or the way that they connect with the world might be different than somebody else. And they call it a spectrum because people fall all over the place on the spectrum, and it shows up differently for other people. So it's not a black and white answer, but it does affect things. And they may not attach in the same way. But there's still things that they value, there's still things that they connect with, there's still people that they, and so part of that is learning how to connect with them in the way that works for them. So they might, and again, it depends on where they're at on the spectrum, um, but it does affect that, and vice versa. If you're the family member of somebody who is on the spectrum, that affects your attachment because you're longing to connect with this person, you love this person, and you don't know how to because maybe they're nonverbal and they don't know how to tell you, or maybe they experience the world differently, and so it's figuring it out. Um,
Or even if you are like let's say you are like, but like if I'm, you know, I'm a hugger. If I'm a hugger and somebody with neurodiversity does not want to be touched, like part of my love language of tugging is going to be, I won't be able to do that. So I will have to use other ways of connecting. So even if I do know how, it still will be, there will be a gap in what I want to do and what is going to be meaningful for the relationship. Now, on the other hand, I think that that's really important to understand, in all relationships. It's like, what is going to be meaningful? I always found the love language is really helpful. I have friends that like it's gifts. They really like gifts. And like I'm like, I love a man with dishpan hands, like do housework for me and I'm really happy, I mean, so it's like the love language is very different and understanding how we connect and what's meaningful. Like just because I'm this way doesn't mean that, that if I show up my way for other relationships, it's going to be useful. So, and I did put Candace Christiansen does great work with neurodivergence. And so I put a link to her website on this. I need to ask her to join us sometime for a webinar. I'm going to write myself a note. You were both instrumental in my early sex addiction recovery process, and I've struggled at times not to put you both on pedestals. No, we're not pedestal people. No, 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 no. Not, neither of us are like that. So I can speak for both of us on that one. So as a partner, how do I connect to my feelings? I just feel depressed and sad, but no anger or devastating or any other feelings. I have not cried in a month. My husband chose his addiction over his family a year ago.
So I'm hearing that you feel depressed and sad, which is partly connecting with your feelings. And sadness, as we said earlier, comes from a sense that you've lost something. And in this case, you've lost your husband. You've lost the dream of what your future would be together, the hopes and the joys and the celebrations. And I would imagine if you are celebrating the holidays at this time of year, you've lost that. That doesn't look the same as it did before. And so there is a ton of sadness and depression around that. And so part of that is just honoring that. Um, and know that it, we don't want to like walk around looking depressed all the time. We don't, especially if you have kids, you don't want that. But that's how you feel, right? So it's finding out, well, who can I share this sadness with? Is there another person on this planet who can relate to the sadness of the holidays and not having their partner here with them? And yeah, there is a ton of drop-in groups and stuff for that. And so the other part of that is I'm hearing the pain in that and hoping that your husband chose his addiction over his family a year ago and hoping that you're not internalizing that. And what I mean by that is saying, well, it's because we weren't enough for him. We didn't matter enough for him. We weren't that important. We didn't. Those are those core beliefs that I talk about. And it's easy to believe that, and it's not true. It's not true. You are enough, and you always have been enough. And he couldn't connect with his value and his light. And so he chose another path, which is not a reflection of who you are or what you're worthy of experiencing. And so you're going to be going through this grieving process, and it makes me sad that you're going through it. And I just want to hold space and hope that you know that you're not alone in that. And that hopefully you'll be able to find some people who can love on you enough that you can actually share the feelings that you have. If you're like me and I don't feel like sometimes I have people to share that, I just hold it in. I just hold it in and I hold it in until it explodes. Um, um, but when I have somebody I can share it with, it makes being able to share the emotion easier too. So
So depression is one of the stages of grief, and I did put the previously recorded webinars. Debbie McCrae did a great job of it's not going to help you magically get through it. It's a process, and there will be, and it isn't like you go, oh, now I'm through that stage, and now I'm going to go to the next one, and then it's all going to be gone, you know. but understanding that this is normal, and and what are some tools that you can do for self-care. I did put the Empowered Women's Retreat. It's amazing and healing, and it helps process through the negative emotions and things, and taking care of yourself. So please consider that, as well. That'll be January 24th through 27th. That would be an amazing gift for yourself and for your family, if you're able to do that. The women look different, just over the weekend time. They look different. They laugh again. Like, they come and they're not laughing. I promise you, there's not a single one laughing. And by the last evening, they're laughing, and lighter. They're just lighter. So, okay. Next question is, I am currently separated from my wife. I'm a porn addict, and we are currently going through betrayal trauma. My wife says that she wants to break me of my dishonesty, and I do too, but it's surprisingly challenging. One of her requirements is to notify her whenever, oh my gosh, whenever I'm triggered by someone, and describe the where and when and what the person looks like. I've asked her if this hurts her, and she says yes. My question is this too much for her to ask? I have trouble seeing the purpose of it. So hurtful. Edging, yes. Relapse, yes. But triggers. So Aaron Snow has talked about this on webinars. I put the previously recorded. That is extremely dysregulating for partners. I don't know who you guys are working with, but good therapists to help you guys with this. Her, yeah, like, this is, I can understand how you guys are really going. You're in the thick of the betrayal trauma, and it feels like you're just, accelerating it by, like, this back and forth of this. Triggers are data for you to go get, you could go lean into the help that you need. Call your therapist, go to your 12-step, call your peer support. For her, what is the self-care that she's doing? But oh goodness, like, that could be so dysregulating.
The key phrase that you have is she wants to break you of your
Oh,
dishonesty.
there was that.
That that's not her job.
No,
Um,
she'll never be successful. Like,
no, that's
yeah,
nobody's job. That's your job
yeah.
to learn how to be honest with yourself and not lie, right? So that's your job. It's nobody else's job to break you of that. Um, and so the challenge with that is, if that's the perspective, there's gonna when I'm feeling like I'm responsible for fixing your problem, and then I had to learn this a long time ago as a therapist, because people come and they want me to be responsible for fixing their life, and I learned that I couldn't do that, because I would go home worried and anxious and like sick to death about these clients and all the issues that they had, and that I didn't feel like I was helping them enough. And I finally had to realize, no, these are your wounds, these are your things, and I'm going to do the best to provide wound care. But at the end of the day, you got to go home and take your wounds with you. You got to go. And this is the same. Like, if I feel like I am responsible for solving your problem, I will always feel like a failure. And then I'm always going to ramp it up, and I'm going to become super controlling, and I'm going to try to really wrap things around that I don't have the ability to actually control. So that is a red flag for me. I understand that that's not what you're asking. You're asking about whether that will hurt. And she said, yes, that would be hurtful. I understand why partners want to know that sometimes. It makes sense to me. At the end of the day, I don't know if that's as helpful as there's some other things. Part of the way that you got into this mess was that you lied. And so finding ways to tell the truth, starting with yourself, is going to be imperative. And sometimes it's going to take somebody who's an an objective third party who's going to help you be able to work through that, aka a therapist. So that's something I'd recommend for you. But that sounds really overwhelmingly unmanageable for both of you.
Yeah, Aaron, I didn't probably finish my sentence, but Aaron talks about, as a betrayed partner, she has got to focus on her regulation, and healthy boundaries are not control. Like Troy just shared, he can't control his clients. The only person I can control, myself, my actions and my reactions. I can't make anybody do anything. I can't break anybody of anything. And the more I'm focusing on that, the more dysregulated I am. Because you know what? The world doesn't line up. Like I have a plan, and if they would just follow that, but it hasn't happened thus far, and I'm 100% convinced that it never will. And the more I try, the more I'm pushing up against, I'm just miserable, so you guys can keep doing this, and trust me, I know couples that have done this, for 10 years, 20 years, you know, and they're comfortable doing that. Those are the patterns that you've developed. And I call it the negative two-step. You do this, I do this, you do this, I do this. And you're wearing a spot in the floor, but you're not making any progress. Again, the Dr. Stan Tatkin and Dr. Rob, January of 2019, it's an old one. We do. That's a healthy relationship. If that's what you want, then stopping the patterns that we're in now and how do we move forward, towards each other. But yeah, that I can only imagine how painful this is for her and how it doesn't feel good for you either. So I it's the next one. I put a couple links in. What are some resources to not only identify but reverse maladaptive core beliefs? Like most addicts, these core beliefs are the ones that help survive a chaotic life. So I shared your work group and Dr. Eddie's, both of which I find super helpful. The link is on our website, but I put the specific link too. And then Troy has Finding Peace retreats. You can go work with Troy specifically, which is amazing to do. I did it in person. So I would suggest you consider that as well. I would not do it if you're really super early in all of this. You want to be stable enough to do that, but you can always reach out to Troy and ask him, tell him your specific situation. But both of those would be super helpful, I think, for getting some traction. Other thoughts?
Mm. The one thing, if you do have a therapist who does EMDR
Mm,
is really helpful in changing some of those in a fairly efficient manner. So that's another way. It's not the only way, but it is another way to maybe look at an EMDR therapist in your area who could help you reframe that.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's, really helpful. We talked about the inner child stuff, like uh, think about when you started believing those things, how old were you at that time, and I do find it really powerful. Get a picture out of yourself at that age, and the compassion you can have for the little you, like you start changing things, just going like, how was I at 8 years old supposed to know how to do the adult world? Didn't know, you know, and so I came up with my best solution. Wasn't pretty good, but it was the best I could do at 8. So I think we can start, just having compassion for ourselves and the wounds, but not get stuck. Okay, this is where I was, and how do we move forward? So, and move forward we do, right, Troy?
Ew, yeah.
And we're going to move forward to 2025. So thank you for those of you joining us today. We appreciate the questions, and we'll be back in January. Watch the schedule. Like I said, there's some changes for the rest of for the holiday time, so pay attention to those. But we're grateful you were here, Troy. Wishing you a
You
safe trip to
too.
Tennessee and a wonderful time with family. So
Thank you. You as well. And
thank
all of
you.
you have a happy holiday and a new year. See you
See you in
soon.
2025. Bye.